everyone, it's Tori, and today I will be doing the Opposites book tag, complete with glare all over my glasses. Okay, so I'm not sure who this tag was created by because as with the other tags you'll see, I've probably missed the boat on them and I don't really have enough of a YouTube presence to get tagged by anyone. I just do them for fun. So I saw this tag and wanted to do it. So it's got a lot of questions that have to do with opposites, so let's get started. The first question is first and last book in your collection. So the first book in my collection that I still own is Splendid by Julia Quinn. It's definitely not the first book I bought or was given, but it is the oldest book I have on my shelf. And the last book I bought a lot of books last week, so I had to pick one, and I picked one of them, and it's The Empress of the Seven Hills by Kate Quinn, was the last book I bought. The next question is a cheap book versus an expensive book. So a cheap book, the books I bought last week were all part of a sidewalk sale, so they were all really cheap. And I got The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson for 50 cents. So that was the cheapest book I have. And the most expensive book I have is The Longest Ride by Nicholas Sparks. I bought this, kind of pre-ordered it and paid full price, and it's signed, so that probably made it a little more expensive too. So that's the most expensive book I bought. The next question is a book with a male protagonist and a book with a female protagonist. So the book with the male protagonist that I went with is Cloaked by Alex Flynn. It's about a guy who kind of goes and finds his dad, and it's all kind of like fairy tale stuff together. So that is the book with the male protagonist. And the book with the female protagonist I chose is Bloodlines by Rochelle Mead. It has the female protagonist's name is Sydney, so that's the female. Okay, the next question is a book you read fast and a book that took you too long to read. So the book I read fast is Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince by J.K. Rowling. I only took 2 days to read this book, and the funny thing about it is it's really not one of my favorites in the series at all. I don't really care for number 6. However, I read it very quickly because it had just come out and I was on a really long car ride and then was at a baseball game, and I hate baseball, so I just read my book the whole time. So I finished that in 2 days. That was the fastest book I've read. And a book that took me too long to read is The Lost Symbol by Dan Brown. I really like this book. It's part of the Angels and Demons Da Vinci Code series, the Robert Langdon Quartet, but it just took me a really long time to read it. They're kind of long and they do get kind of slow in the middle, so I didn't really get into it a whole lot. I did like it once I finished the book, but it just took me way too long to read. The next question is a book with a pretty cover and a book with an ugly cover. So I'm probably going to pick one that you all agree with for the pretty cover, and that is The Selection by Kiera Cass. I think this cover is gorgeous, and the covers for The Elite and The One are also very pretty. They're not on the back of this book, but they're really pretty covers too. And a book with an ugly cover, I will probably make some enemies with this one, but that's fine. I really dislike the cover of Looking for Alaska by John Green. I just don't really like it. After reading the book, I really don't get it either. So that is the book with the ugly cover I picked. The next question is a national book versus an international book, and based on the videos I've watched of this tag, it's got a little confusion, so I took it to mean just a book that takes place in the nation you live, which for me is the United States, and a book that takes place outside of the United States. So for the national book, the national book I picked was The Next Always by Nora Roberts. It's part of a trilogy that takes place in Maryland. And for international book, I kind of cheated a little bit, but I chose A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle because it technically takes place outside of the United States. It takes place across all different dimensions, so that's the international book I picked. The next question is a thin book versus a thick book. So the thin book I picked was The Bad Beginning by Lemony Snicket, the first in the series of Unfortunate Events, and it's a thin book. And the thick book I picked was Breaking Dawn, which is the last in the Twilight series. And that's the thick book. The next question in this tag is a fiction book versus a nonfiction book. And this was actually pretty difficult because I don't really own any nonfiction. I don't really enjoy nonfiction, and any of the nonfiction I have are like leadership and management books, and I keep those at my office. So this one was a little hard, but the fiction book that I picked is Queen of Babel by Meg Cabot. It's the first of a trilogy that I loved. And the nonfiction book, I'm not even sure if it's completely nonfiction, but I think it is, and this is Sail Away Ladies by Jim Coogan. It's a book about sailors and their wives and stories of Cape Cod women in the age of sail. So my parents got it for me when they were on vacation. I've not read it yet. I think it's really interesting, but this is my nonfiction pick. The next book is a book that was too romantic, like a romantic book and an action book. And I own a lot of romance books, so it was easy for me to pick this one. But this one was a little cheesy, and you can even tell by the title it's going to be really cheesy. But I chose It's in His Kiss by Julia Quinn. She writes over-the-top romantic. Sometimes it's historic romance, and while it's not like Harlequin Red Spines or anything, they are next to that. I mean, they're pretty romantic. I love them, but they are pretty cheesy. So that is the one I chose for the romantic book. And the action book I chose was The Hunger Games. So this has a touch of romance to it. You know, you get the storyline, the beginnings of Katniss's and Peeta's relationship, but it's really not focused on that. It's mostly focused on teenagers fighting to the death. So I picked that for action. And the last question on this tag is a book that made you happy and a book that made you sad. And for this question, I'm actually choosing the same book because it's the book I read most recently that made me really, really happy, but it also did make me very sad. And that is The Fault in Our Stars by John Green, which doesn't have a slipcover, but it's The Fault in Our Stars, and this book made me very, very happy, and it made me very, very sad. And I think it makes you so happy because you're so sad that it's kind of like a bittersweet happy sad. So that is the book I picked for the last question. So that was the last question on the tag. I hope you enjoyed my video. I had fun kind of picking out all the books and trying not to repeat a series or repeat an author, so that was kind of fun too. And the fun fact of the day, besides the fact that I have glasses and they're glaring all over the place, is that Captain America is my second favorite superhero. Batman is my first, but Captain America is my second favorite superhero. So that's a fun fact about me. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a great night. Thanks for watching.